Yesterday, I played at an invitational at Mindful Games. This invitational was for people who did pretty well at the 1K events they've been hosting for the past couple of months. And I brought Katsu with the Unban of Bonds of Ancestry. I think Katsu is actually a very strong pick going into high seas. And in this tournament, I was able to, going first, play a 41 damage turn against my Dash.io opponent. So they ended their turn -1 at 11. Obviously, that's really strong. I want to get into the Katsu deck, start with a budget deck, move towards a mid-range deck, and I can tell you what cards you want to be upgrading first, and then discuss the final build of Katsu that I've been playing and how you can play it to the best of your ability. This is my ultra budget Katsu deck. This deck is worth less than $20. It has exactly one Majestic. It's Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. This card is obviously insanely broken. It's a tutor, and it's an extra card from your deck off of your equipment. Obviously, it's broken. In my opinion, this card is almost as good as Traverse. It's just that level. You definitely want to be purchasing this. It's only like $5. Just buy it. Everything else in this deck is insanely cheap, worth basically nothing. So let's start with Katsu and Katsu's ability. Katsu says the first time an attack action card you control hits each turn, you may discard a card with cost 0. If you do, search your deck for a card with combo, banish it, then shuffle. You may play it this turn. He also has Harmonized Kadachi as his weapon. Once per turn, you pay 1 to attack with a 1 attack weapon. If you have a card in your pitch zone with cost 0, it gets go again. So what that means is we want a bunch of blues in our deck with cost 0, right? Because we can discard those 0 costs to go search our deck for combo cards, turn on our combo abilities. So all of the blues in our deck cost 0, so they all turn on Kadachis. Most of them block 3. We do have a couple that block 2, but they have some other uses. So they discard the Katsu ability, and then they turn on our Kadachis for go again. The most important part of this deck is the Surging Descendant Bonds line. Surging Strike is a 2 for 5 go again that costs 2. Now, that's not a super great rate. That's pretty whatever as far as rates go. But if you play Surging Strike, it turns on your Descendant Gust Wave, which is a 1 for 3 go again, which is also not a great rate. However, if Surging Strike was the last attack this combo chain, this card costs 1 less to play and attacks for +2. So it's a 0 for 5 if your last card was Surging Strike. So if we play Surging Strike, Descendant Gust Wave into Kadachi, well, that's 5 + 5 + 1, which is a 3-card 11, which is pretty good. But that's not the ceiling of this deck. If you play Bonds of Ancestry after Descendant Gust Wave, we start popping off. This is a 2-cost 4-attack card without go again. However, if a card with Gust Wave in its name was the last attack this combat chain, this costs 2 less to play, so it costs 0. And has go again. And when this attacks, you may banish a card with combo from your graveyard. If you do, search your deck for a card with the same name, banish it, then shuffle. You may play it this combat chain. So it tutors for an extra combo card out of your deck. Now, what that means is if I have a blue Flusterfist in my graveyard that I blocked with earlier in the game, well, I go search my deck for a red Flusterfist, and Bonds of Ancestry was a 1-card 8. So if my turn is Surging Strike, Descendant Gust Wave, Bonds, Kadachi, Flusterfist, well, it's 5 + 5 + 1, which is 11, plus the Bonds, which is 15, plus the Flusterfist, which is 19. So my turn was a 4-card 19 if I'm able to play them all. Now, you often will not have all the cards in hand that you need in order to play them all. Well, that's where Katsu's hero ability comes in, right? If I attack with Surging Strike and I have a Descendant Gust Wave in hand, and my opponent does not block the Surging Strike, I can discard any of my 0 costs in order to search for Bonds of Ancestry, and I get to go Surging, Descendant, Bonds into whatever, into heaven. Let's say my opponent does block 6 on the Surging Strike. If I have a Descendant Gust Wave in hand, I just get to play the Descendant Gust Wave, and now they have to block the Descendant Gust Wave unless they want me to be able to play Bonds of Ancestry from my deck. So there's a lot of mind games where this deck, where if you start with Surging Strike, your opponent is just crying because they feel like they have to block it. But then if you have the natty combo, they have to block the next thing anyways. So you're leaving a Surging Strike in your arsenal until you're drawing other combo pieces and attempting to build huge combos off it. Now there is another combo card off of Surging Strike, which is called Whelming Gust Wave. This card has Gust Wave in its name, so it turns on Bonds. It's a 0 for 3 attack. It says, if Surging Strike was the last attack this combat chain, Whelming Gust Wave has +1 go again, and when this hits, draw a card. So this on hit is even worse for your opponent, because if you go Surging Strike and they block 6, and then you go Whelming Gust Wave, well, now they have to block, or else you're going to be able to draw a card. And you can also stack it so you draw the card first, and then you can discard it to Katsu's hero ability. So even if your card is just a 3-card hand of, even if your hand is just a 3-card hand of Surging Whelming, you can discard the card you draw off Whelming if it's a 0 cost, and go search your deck for Bonds of Agony. And then in that case, if the Whelming hits, your 3-card hand turn into 19, which is insane. We are playing some other cards in this deck, right? Some other combo cards. 100 Wins is a 0 for 3 combo card. Sometimes if you have 100 Wins in your graveyard, you banish it off Bonds because you have some card in hand that you want to play. So it's better to get the Go Again than to get the +1 damage. A Spinning Wheel Kick is here for similar reasons. But also, both of these cards get +1 if the last card in the combat chain had the same name as it. So sometimes, you attack with 100 Wins for 3, and then it hits, and you search your deck for another 100 Wins for 4. It's kind of niche to do that. You usually want to be focusing on the Surging Strike lines, but you'll run into other places where you do that. We're also running Leg Tap in this list. This card isn't amazing, but if you start with these 1 for 4 Go-Agains, oftentimes your opponent isn't going to think they have to block it. But if you have a 5-card hand, well, you can attack with the Leg Tap, and then when it hits, you trigger your Katsu ability, and you can search for one of your combo cards, and then maybe the rest of your hand is like surging into Whelming, and then you got the Bonds off of your Katsu ability. So there's just a bunch of little tricks to this deck that you'll have to learn through trial and error. But Leg Tap also combos into Rising Knee Thrust, which just turns one of our blues into a head jab, which is totally fine. We play Fluster Fist as our chain ender off of Bonds, just because it has a block 3 blue that becomes a 4 when you Bonds it. We have extra copies of Surging Strike in this deck in Be Like Water. It's a 0 for 3 Go Again, and when this hits, you may pay 1. If you do, choose Head Jab, Surging Strike your Twin Twisters. This gains the chosen name. If your opponent lets this hit, they're basically throwing the game, because if you're ever attacking with a Be Like Water, well, you need a Surging Strike in your hand. So you get to turn this into Surging Strike and then get to do your whole line. We're also playing Salt the Wound, which is the reason why we're playing Mask of the Pouncing Lynx. Obviously, Salt the Wound off Mask is amazing, and in the regular combo line, if you just go Surging, Descendant, Bonds, 100 Wins into Mask of the Pouncing Lynx, right? That's 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's Salt the Wind for 6, which is like the bare minimum. But then sometimes, you get the Kadachi in there, so it's for 7. And then the real kicker is you oftentimes can do 2 Bonds in the same turn. So how you do that is you draw up your hand, and maybe it already has like the pure line in it. So your hand is like Surging, Descendant, Bonds, and then you have another card that's a 0 cost and a blue, or maybe you break your chest to make the Surging Strike free, and you end up being able to search in extra Bonds from your deck. What that means is now you can go Surging, Descendant, Bonds, target a Descendant in your graveyard, get another Descendant, play that Descendant with Go Again. It's only for 3, but it allows you to play the other Bonds for free, and then target 100 Wins or Fluster Fist. If you target 100 Wins, you can break Mask of the Pouncing Lynx to get Salt the Wound, and that's 8 Chain Links, right? So you can deal insane amounts of damage with playing 2 Bonds in the same turn. That's really the goal of this deck, is you're trying to gain tempo by forcing your opponent to block until you can create a hand where you pop your Hardened Crosswrap to play a Surging Strike for free. You have 4 other cards in your hand, and they're all going to turn into 1,000,000 damage. You can also attempt to play double Salt the Wound in this deck by arsenaling a Salt the Wound and then getting another one off Pouncing Lynx, and then using Snapdragon Scalers to give one Go Again. Our sideboard has a couple different options for different heroes. We're playing 2 AB for Kano. I think we're pretty good against Kano. You just attack him to death, and then you hold up 1 card that's a blue in your hand on the turn where you're presenting lethal. We have 3 energy potions for Guardians, especially Jarl. I think energy potion is pretty good against Jarl. And then we have Wax On and Flick Flack and Sound the Alarm, which we're playing into the Assassins. Flick Flack is also extremely good against Ninja because it blocks 4, and then our next card we block with is going to cost 5. The majority of cards in our deck have combo. Then we're running Snatch as just a good stuff 0 for 4 that we can give go again off Snapdragon Scalers. We've talked about the budget list. I have a couple matchups in our matchup guide, really the important ones. This deck kind of just wants to do the same thing in most matchups, so even if you don't want to do too much sideboarding, I wouldn't worry about this that much. But I think this deck is really good for new players to get into. So if you're a new player, I would definitely try and pick up all these cards for really cheap. Maybe ask in your local Discord if they have any of these cards, and then buy your Mask of Momentum for Mask of the Pouncing Links for $5. You could definitely win armories with this for sure. I think you could even like top 8 pro quests with just this list. But let's talk about upgrades you can do. This is my $150 list. Now I wouldn't go straight from the $20 list to the $150 list. I would buy, some cards at a time, right? So the first card I would buy is Ancestral Harmony. It's a 0 cost 3 block blue, so it fits directly into our blue base, and it says your attacks with combo get +1 this turn, and then you banish the top card of your deck. If it has combo, you may play it this turn. So it's an Anthem effect, which is already pretty good. But if you banish a combo card, this card is at minimum a 1-card 10. Like, it just goes insane. And if you ever hit one of the really good cards off it, like Bonds or Descendant, and you already have a combo in your hand, you're off to the races. This card is how I was able to deal, 41 damage on turn 0, right? So first I would buy Ancestral Harmony. Just looking at the pricing, it's about $7 per copy. So you spend your $20, and the power level of your deck just rises dramatically when you have Ancestral Harmony, because you're always threatening to just deal 35 plus damage in a turn. The next card I would buy is actually Breeze Rider Boots. This card is slightly better than Snapdragon Scalers in this deck. You can't play Snatch after you cut Snapdragon Scalers, but when you play Breeze Rider Boots, it allows you to play some better lines with Bonds, right? Because sometimes you don't have a Descendant in your graveyard, and so you need to give your Gust Waves go again. So if you ever want to double Bonds, you play a Whelming Gust Wave with go again without the combo, and then you Bonds targeting another one, right? There's a bunch of other stuff you can do with it, but that's like the base case. That's the base case. And then the third card I would buy is Retrace the Past. Now, I don't know if this is like the third best card in the deck. This card is very good, but it is the most fun card, and it allows you to do fun things. But Retrace the Past is a 0 cost blue 3 block, which fits directly into our blue base, and it says when this attacks, if a card with Gust Wave in its name was the last attack this combat chain, name a card, then this gets that name +2 and go again. So it's a 0 for 4 go again at blue that can turn into any type of name. And the important one to know is Open the Center. If you name Open the Center, Flusterfist becomes another copy of Salt the Wound, which is obviously extremely strong, right? This was another part about how I was able to do, 41 damage in the first turn, is you just go Flusterfist into Salt the Wound, which is the reason why in the main I've cut down on 1 Salt the Wound. But Retrace can also do fun things, if you look up, on February, the different cards that require, names, then you could think about all the fun things you can do. But in this list, keep it simple, we just have to Flusterfist, which is fine. But I think playing the other cards that require names, it's a little trolling, but at the Armory, you can have some fun figuring out some other stuff to do with it. Those are the 3 important ones that I would buy before anything else. But you can, there's some other cards you can buy for sure. Visit the Floating Dojo is really cheap, and it is basically a remembrance. It's a blue 0 cost no block, it's an instant. So it fits into our blue base. It says put a Surging Strike and a card with combo from your graveyard on the top or bottom of your deck. So this basically rebuys a Bonds for you and a Surging Strike, which means that you can play a lot of Bonds in a single game. This helps in matchups where you just need to find damage in your deck, like against Jarl, for example. So I would definitely purchase those after I've already purchased, the other cards. Dishonor is another card that I wouldn't purchase as this card isn't extremely strong. However, it's really funny, and in certain situations, it's extremely good. It's a 0 cost 3 block blue. If Bonds of Ancestry was the last attack this combo chain, it gets +2. So it's a 0 for 4 ender on the Bonds turn, which is great. But when this hits a hero, if you control Surging, Descendant, and Bonds of Ancestry, that hero loses all abilities for the rest of the game. There are some matchups where hitting with Dishonor means you win the game instantly. And it's a lot of matchups. It's like half the matchups in the game. However, if your opponent knows about it, they're never going to get hit by it. But there are some times where I, draw a natty combo and I hit my opponent with Dishonor on turn 0 after, they block 6 on the Surging and 6 on the Whelming. So, if you hit Kano turn 0, Dash IO turn 0 with Dishonor, you just win the game on the spot, which means that it's good enough to play, but it's not actually as good as, Retrace or Harmony. So I would definitely purchase it after I've purchased those cards. There's some other Majestics in this deck list that aren't quite as good. I do include one Mugenshi in the Lord of Wind line. It's a pretty complicated combo, but Mugenshi is a 1-for-5 if you've played it after Whelming Gust Wave, and if it hits, you get to search your deck for any number of cards named Lord of Winds, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. And then Lord of Wind allows you to attack with one of the Lord of Winds that you draw off Mugenshi, and then you can pitch the other two, and it gets +6 if you pitch the other two, so it's like it's kind of a 1-card 8 on hit off the Mugenshi, but it's like really a 3-card 8. And then you also get to shuffle back a bunch of Surging Whelmings or Mugenshis into your deck, which means that you just get more time to play more cards, which can be good in some matchups. Now, Mugenshi is never really going to hit unless you have Razor Reflex, but it's good to know. Gust Wave of the Second Wind is another card that's like a nice to have, not a must have. It's kind of just another copy of Flusterfist. However, sometimes you need to banish this off of Bonds of Ancestry in order to play a second Bonds or to play Retrace. So there's just a lot of different stuff that it does. I only play 2 copies because I think 3 copies is just a little too many, but it is nice to have one in the graveyard and then being able to search one from your deck off of Bonds. And then Ancestral Empowerment is another really strong card that's kind of more of a nice to have instead of a must have. This just says target ninja attack action card gets +1 draw card, so it's 1 value for free. It only targets attack actions, but it allows you to much easier get your Katsu ability off. A lot of times people are blocking +1 on combo cards to get around Breaking Scales, which is your arms that give a card with combo +1. But if you have Ancestral Empowerment in your hand, you can get over that +1. But, if your opponent doesn't block you, you can just discard the Empowerment to go draw a combo card from your deck. So this card is more of a nice to have, but it does allow you to more easily get off your combos each game. This deck list is very similar to the last one. You just play the visits instead of the energy potions into Guardian, but basically everything is the same. I didn't make a matchup guide for this list because what this list isn't really like a list that I would say you should be playing this. Now, if you have like, an extra 150 to just spend on a deck, you could definitely buy into this, and this is almost everything that you need. But if you start with the $20 deck, I would definitely like build up over time. Try and find trades. Maybe like I open up something cool in a gem pack. Somebody wants to trade, right? Just a bunch of cool stuff to do. If you add like some cards at a time, and maybe you can find some cool stuff to do with the retrades after you bought that. But this was my $150 list. Now we can move to my fully tuned Katsu Bonds legal list. It's not too different from the last list we were looking at. I think the main deck might be exactly the same. Yeah, it looks exactly the same. But there are some sideboard options that we've unlocked now that we're spending more money. And this deck is still, like, as far as Flesh and Blood goes, budget. It's $310. That's the cheapest deck on the market that is good. The big one is Mask of Momentum. This card says when an attack action card you control is the 3rd or higher chain link in a row to hit, draw a card, and it blocks for 2. That means you can go Kadachi into 1 cost, and your opponent basically has to block the 1 cost, or else you just draw a card, right? So what this allows us to do is into Assassin, we can pivot into a mid-range playstyle, and we can afford to be blocking more and making our opponent block. And then if my opponent is blocking as an Assassin, they're less able to do some of the more crazy like Bonds of Agony style stuff. and we will be able to have a little less interaction against us when we're playing our big turns. And so you like play a mid-range game, try and get them to block a little more, and then you play one big turn, and that one big turn pushes the game over the edge. Um, I still think most of the assassins are not like the greatest matchups, but I think Mario is actually a pretty good matchup for us. And I think Slippy is definitely playable. Slippy might be the worst one. New, it's possible that matchup is actually extremely bad, but I think if you play this mid-range playstyle, it's going to be a totally fine matchup. And this deck has a couple matchup guides on February, so I would definitely check this out. You know, if you got the $300 to spend on the deck, or maybe you already own like Mask of Momentum and Sensor, like you saw my Ira deck, you bought those. I would pick it up. I think this deck is probably the most fun deck in the game for me right now, and it is quite strong. I think this deck is like a top 5 deck in the meta. It competes with Syndra and Fi as being like a big damage ninja. So I would definitely recommend trying to play this deck at your armories and even higher. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I'll try to answer everything that's down there, and please like and subscribe.